The ties between the U.S. and Mexico run far beyond the border. What kind of relationship do other states have with our southern neighbor?
We need people moving into the state. We can't do it with the existing population. We need to keep the population that we have, and we want to, encourage new people to move to Iowa.
And how will a new president affect Tucson's efforts to do more business with Mexico?
If I could say one thing to the president, it would be, you do not want to become an isolationist.
Plus, mental health in the county jail and a debate about raising Tucson's sales tax. This is Metro Week.
Hi, I'm Vanessa Barchfield, in for Andrea Kelly. Thanks for joining us. The recent election put a spotlight on the relationship between the U.S. and Mexico. We'll take a look at what that means for us here in Arizona and in other states around the country. First, a look at the week's top stories from the Arizona Public Media Newsroom.
The week began with a visit to Arizona by the Mexican ambassador to the United States, and it wrapped up with a Tucson visit by Claudia Ruiz Massieu, the Mexican Secretary of Foreign Relations. She said that the United States and Mexico have a long history of good relations, and while there is uncertainty with the new Trump administration, she's confident the new relationship will be based on mutual respect, truth, and understanding, as it always has. We'll have more on Tucson-Mexican relations coming up. A Guatemalan woman who was in Immigration and Customs Enforcement's custody in Arizona died this week. The woman's death is the agency's third in the past 2 months. The 36-year-old woman was pronounced dead after suffering seizures at Banner Medical Center in Casa Grande. According to ICE officials, the woman had a seizure at the Eloy Detention Center, then suffered more seizures in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. The cause of death is still unknown. The Border Patrol arrested the woman in mid-November, and she was in ICE's custody since last week. This weekend, the University of Arizona will dedicate a memorial to the USS Arizona to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor. The memorial on the school mall is a full-scale outline of the ship's deck and displays bronze medallions to honor each of the 1,177 service members who died in the attack. The Pearl Harbor Remembrance Ceremony will begin Sunday afternoon at 3 with a flyover from Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. For more on all of the week's stories, visit our website.
After the election, there are many questions about what a Trump administration will mean for Arizona, for immigration, trade with Mexico, and the fate of Dreamer students who got a temporary reprieve from deportation. Those same concerns are being shared with state officials all over the country. This week, lieutenant governors from across the U.S. visited southern Arizona. Half of them had never been to the border. Nancy Montoya caught up with them as they toured Nogales.
I am Michael J. Stack, Lieutenant Governor of Pennsylvania.
You're here in southern Arizona now to catch a little feel of what the border is like. What are some of your impressions?
Well, you have an idea in your head. It's completely different when you're standing here. And you hear this whole idea about having a wall, and you realize, people can jump over these walls anytime they want to.
My name is Kim Reynolds, and I'm the Lieutenant Governor of Iowa. I was surprised by the wall. I thought it would be a solid wall. It's not a solid wall. This is my first time, and it was a wonderful opportunity to really understand the system and understand what some of the border states are dealing with.
As far as Pennsylvania goes, what does trade with Mexico mean to your state?
Well, it's huge. We have $8 billion in trade with Mexico, which makes Mexico one of our leading trading partners. We just did a agreement with a company from Mexico in the Port of Philadelphia, where we're gonna do trade with agricultural products and fruits and vegetables, which is really monumental. It's going to be jobs, and it's going to be great for agriculture. So we have good relations that need to be better.
Iowa is far from the border.
It is far.
But what kind of impact does trade with Mexico have on the state of Iowa?
Well, first of all, our ability to export is really important to Iowa. 1 in 5 jobs is attributed to our ability to export Iowa's commodities and goods. Mexico is our number 2 trading partner. Canada is number 1. China is number 3. In 2014, we exported $13 billion in Iowa products, so it's extremely important for us. Iowa is the number 1 producer of corn and soybeans and hogs and eggs. And so, we're feeding a growing world population. It's a global marketplace, and it's really important for us to be able to not only market our products to the world, as Mexico, but also to look for reverse investment into the state of Iowa.
There's the unwritten stress of the illegal immigration issue. And so I think there needs to be better communication, better understanding between people who live in Pennsylvania and people who are trading partners in Mexico. And so, I think the more that we can talk about the issue with accurate facts, the better that's going to be. That's why I'm here.
In Iowa, we've been very welcoming to that. We know if we want to really honestly continue to grow the economy that we believe we have the opportunity to, we need people moving into the state. We can't do it with the existing population. We need to keep the population that we have, and we want to encourage new people to move to Iowa. But we just need to work with the existing laws that are on the books, make sure that we secure the border, and then let's work together to move forward to put in place an immigrant system.
More times than not, most of the immigration issue is just about economic opportunity, and although we do have the issue with the cartels and some violent bad players, most of it is people seeking economic opportunity. So we've got to get that out in the open, have that discussion, and find a path where we can figure out solutions to the problem and not rip families apart.
Iowa may not have the population of DACA students that the Dreamers that many other states have, but you still have your share of DACA students, the Dreamers. Where is Iowa in terms of what will happen to these students in the future?
Well, I think first of all what we need to do is focus on the laws that are already on the books, and we need to secure the border. And then we take a look at how we address some of the issues that you're talking about, how we expedite the system. I think we need to make it simpler for people to come to the country legally. We're a country of laws, and it's important that we abide by the laws that are in place. But I think so let's first of all we need to secure the border and make sure that we look at the process so that we can make it simpler. I think for people immigrants that want to immigrate to the United States.
Everyone deserves to have an opportunity for freedom and for economic opportunity and safety. And I think we have a lot of kids that want to have a chance to live as American citizens, and they're worried about their own parents, whether their parents could be sent away from them. So it's an issue we really need to focus on, and in a way that is responsible, not with hyperbole and fear.
There's a great unknown, not knowing what President-elect Trump is going to do in terms of immigration. What do you want to continue? What is your biggest fear of something that will end, something that will be jeopardized?
I think the biggest thing is you have to have communication. It's like in any successful relationship, there's got to be communication and dialogue, and from all sides, it's got to be a global solution. So I think a lot of the things that President-elect Trump talked about, I think it's based on some of it on misinformation, hyperbole, and fear, a lot of it. And I think he's now getting to that point where he knows he's got to solve these problems for real now. So it's going to have to be, he's going to have all hands on deck to make sure that you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, where you think you're solving a problem, but you're really creating more of a problem, and you're doing more injustice than justice, and you're working against the interest of the people of the United States instead of in favor of it. And you're working against a positive relationship with our great trading partner, Mexico. So it's got to be a global solution to this problem.
92% of purchasing power is outside of the United States, for heaven's sakes. And so we need to be able to market those products to the world.
Mayor Jonathan Rothchild has been working to build the business relationship between Tucson and cities in Sonora, Mexico. Arizona Public Media's Christopher Conover sat down with the mayor and asked him what advice he'd give other government officials who want to do the same.
What I think is most important at this time, in this time of uncertainty, is that we recognize how important trade agreements are to our country, how they've strengthened our country, and quite frankly, in retrospect, those of us who've been working on those have not done a good enough job communicating to the people at large that, for instance, we do $8.6 billion of exports to Mexico. each year that Mexico is Arizona's second largest trading partner, that at the border, if we can have resources for customs so that we can move commerce through securely and safely, that a byproduct of that is also border security overall. One of the things that I've taken to saying is that at customs, they bust 18-wheelers. At Border Patrol, they bust backpacks. And so to focus on trade is incredibly important, and we can't turn our back on that at this time in this country.
You sat down with the Mexican ambassador to the U.S. this week. What did you all talk about?
He was relatively optimistic. He believes that we need to focus on bringing more Mexican companies to the United States, and that's certainly been one of my areas of focus. And he believes that we need to get the word out about how, as trade crosses the border, for instance, a Ford automobile in Hermosillo will cross the border 8 times, both between the United States and Mexico, before it's fully manufactured. That this isn't just a one-way street, but it's a two-way street. We saw that yesterday with the announcement of the new auto plant in Casa Grande, where our governor went down to Hermosillo to announce 2,000 jobs into southern Arizona. The message that the ambassador delivered, and which I took with me, is that trade agreements need to be negotiated. We don't slam the door on our negotiations, but certainly they should be looked at for fairness for labor, fairness to the environment, overall fairness. And the Mexican people are ready to do that. I believe they've always been ready to do that. And hopefully in this country, we will continue to do that because, quite frankly, Chris, the economy of southern Arizona is not solely dependent, but certainly heavily influenced by our ability to have international trade.
You mentioned bringing Mexican businesses into Tucson and southern Arizona. To that end, you've been having some discussions with the former president of Mexico, Vicente Fox, and I understand there's some good news on this.
He really wants to focus on entrepreneurship and innovation. And what we've been able to do is convince President Fox that we have an excellent innovation hub here in Tucson with the University of Arizona, with Pima Community College, with Tech Launch, with Startup Tucson, and on and on. And so he's coming for a tour of that, but at the same time, we want to expose him to our business community, give him those opportunities to see what we have, because it is at least our plan and his to take some of the best and brightest of what he has and bring them here to Tucson to continue work, and again, continue that work that will go across both sides of the border.
And I would think having a former president of Mexico tell the people of Mexico, tell his business colleagues of Mexico, Tucson's a great place to be, that's probably better than you or our governor or somebody like that going down. That's got to be a big shot for Tucson.
I'm incredibly pleased. It occurred almost by happenstance. We were visiting Startup Mexico in Mexico City, and you see immediately it looks just like Startup Tucson. It looks just like Connect Co-work. So we started to have those conversations, and in fact learned that President Fox is on that board and has that interest. So it's good news for Tucson.
We have a change of administration in Washington. Brings a lot of, I believe the word you used a few minutes ago was uncertainty. When it comes to things like NAFTA, which President-elect Trump says he wants to see restructured, at times he says he wants to get rid of it. We'll see what finally happens. What does NAFTA right now and trade deals like that, what do they mean to Tucson and the southern Arizona economy?
And we really, I think, started to see that change maybe around 2012. 2011. It's billions of dollars of trade, But for what it's meant for Arizona is over the last few years, an increase in multiples and percentages year after year, 10%, 15%, 20% of increased trade each year. So we don't want to fix something that's not broken. What we need to do is get it communicated that this is actually helping certainly Southern Arizona. And I like to point to Caterpillar. One of the reasons they're moved to Tucson is they have their testing facility down in Sahuarita, but much of what they're designing and testing for, they're moving south. The home goods plant, the Target distribution center, the home goods distribution center is the largest in the United States, in the city limits of Tucson. That's because we're logistically very well situated, particularly to travel south. And that market's not going to get smaller. The Mexican market is right now the 15th largest in the world, scheduled to be the 5th largest within 20 years. Mexico has done a wonderful job of making trade agreements with every industrialized country. And I really, if I could say one thing to the president, it would be, you do not want to become an isolationist. That's not where we want to go. In every way that you can think of the strength of this country. And I'm hoping that over time he gets that advice. Certainly we've seen him give mixed signals on issues regarding the border, and we'll see where it lands.
Startup Tucson, the things that President Fox can potentially bring, those also deal with smaller businesses, not just Caterpillar. We all love having big business like Caterpillar and things like that bring lots of jobs, but also small business is very important, and it sounds like that's just as big a part of your plans and maybe President Fox's plans.
Well, absolutely. When you start with entrepreneurs, when you start with innovators, those often start as 2, 3, 4-person businesses. Technology, and it's a challenge, does not require as much labor. So those are small businesses, but those small businesses can do an awful lot to stimulate a community. And it's the way the world is going, and we need to make sure we stay with it.
Well, thanks so much for sitting down with us.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it.
The Pima County Jail is the largest mental health provider in the county. A recent event in Tucson put mental health and the jail system front and center. Arizona Public Media's Gisela Tellis was there and joined me in the studio to talk about it.
So this was a voter education event. These are monthly, and they're hosted by the League of Women Voters of Greater Tucson. And the idea is to give the public an opportunity to learn about an important issue affecting public life. So some of the recent ones have been about election laws or ballot propositions. And this one gave the attendees a look at mental health services and needs at the Pima County Jail. So the presenters, including the jail administrator, India Davis, talked about some of the challenges they're facing. And based on some of the reactions that I saw, people were surprised by what they learned.
And what did they learn?
The headline here was how great that need is. Davis reported that about 70% of the jail population is living with a mental health issue. 60% are dealing with addiction to alcohol or drugs. So in a system that sees 35,000 bookings a year, that's a really great need.
How does the system handle that extreme level of need?
The county jail has a multi-million-dollar contract with this outside company that provides medical, dental, and behavioral health services. And so they have a mental health team on staff. And what they try to do is, when someone comes in, find out if they have a history of mental illness, if they've been diagnosed before, if there's medication that they're taking that they need to know about. They also have the capability to prescribe medication if they deem it appropriate and necessary to address symptoms, to address a mental health crisis if someone is in a crisis. And then once somebody's going to be released, what they try to do is connect them to services out in the community so that they can continue treatment if they choose to. And so this is a good approach, but the chief psychiatrist, Vicki Knight, was one of the presenters. I spoke with her after the event, and she was saying that it's just the system that makes it really hard not to miss people because there's a high turnover at the jail. So this is an average daily population of 2,000 people. They're there an average of 22 days, but a lot of folks are just there for a handful of days, 4 or 5 days. And so that makes it easy for people to slip through the cracks. They just can't make it to everybody in that time.
Do you have any idea of what else the community could be doing to address this acute problem?
So at the level of the jail, what the three presenters talked about, so the jail administrator, the chief psychiatrist, and actually a judge was there too, Danelle Lusky. What they're hoping to do at the jail level is to actually improve mental health services. And this is with the help of a grant. So we reported earlier this year, here on Metro Week and elsewhere, that Pima County had received a $1.5 million grant from the MacArthur Foundation to reduce their jail population. And their goal is to reduce it by 18% over the next 3 years. So a big part of their plan for doing that involves things like making court more accessible, so fewer people end up in jail for failure to appear at court dates. But a big piece of it is mental health. And what they're hoping to do is make it so that everyone who comes through the jail gets a thorough mental health screening, and to improve the handoff or transition services so that individuals who are leaving the jail can more seamlessly transition to services that are out in the community and have those symptoms and those issues addressed there so that they don't come back. Another part of this is actually strengthening alternative programs. So some already exist. There's a mental health court that diverts non-violent people who are living with a mental illness who end up in the criminal justice system to treatment instead of jail. And what they'd like to do is to expand programs like that. Now, at the level of the community, what everyone agreed would be really important is to fight the stigma that surrounds mental illness so that people feel more comfortable admitting early on that I'm having a problem and I need to get help, because a lot of their contact with the criminal justice system could be avoided if those issues, if those symptoms are addressed early on.
What sort of stage of implementation is the MacArthur grant programming? I mean, are mental health screenings already happening?
They are already happening, but they're not at the level that they'd like them to be. They'd like for it to be across the board 100%. And based on what I heard at the presentation, based on my conversations with the presenters, they're just getting started and they feel like they have a lot of work to do.
All right. Well, thanks so much for your time today, Gisela.
Thank you.
Right now, you pay a 2% tax to the city on things you buy here in Tucson. That may soon change.
The Tucson City Council is considering a proposal to raise the city sales tax by 0.5%. City Manager Michael Ortega suggested the tax as a way to balance Tucson's budget, which has been in deficit for many years in a row. Raising the city sales tax to 2.5% would bring in an additional $50 million a year, according to Ortega's estimates. Over the next 5 years, the proposal is to spend about $100 million on road repairs, fixing major streets and neighborhood roads. $150 million would go to public safety measures, to buy police cars and equipment for the fire department. The City Council is expected to decide Tuesday whether to send the proposal to voters next May.
And now City Manager Michael Ortega joins me in our studios to talk about his proposal. Mr. Ortega, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Raising taxes is often a tricky sell. What do you think Tucsonans need to know about your proposal?
It's a conversation about quality of life and really understanding how our quality of life is impacted by the lack of resources that we have available to us in our current situation.
Why does the public get the final say on this tax?
The public should have the final say when it comes to tax money and not only the generation of tax, but how those taxes are used. And that's really the conversation that the council wants to have with the voters. I mean, they're going through a process now to solicit public input. They've not made a decision to put it before the voters. So there'll be an opportunity for people to weigh in on, what do they think? What's their take on the approach?
Speaking of public input, I got a call from a pollster recently asking me if I would support the measure and also my thoughts on how the money should be spent. Have you gotten any feedback from the pollsters, or do you have any other sort of gauge on where the public does stand on the measure?
Well, clearly the public is putting a lot of emphasis on roads. We know that. That's pretty straightforward when people are asked, what about the condition of our roads. Just driving here today, you can see the condition of our roads needs to be improved. And then also testing to see, some of the needs we have in public safety, and people generally seem supportive of those efforts.
And of course, from 2 to 2.5% doesn't sort of seem like that much. But how much would this actually cost the average Tucsonan?
We've actually run the numbers, and it's just shy of $3 per person within the city. And so and
that's
on a
per
month.
year?
No, per month.
Per month,
I'm
okay.
sorry, thank you for clarifying. So on a monthly basis, it'll cost about $3 per person.
Can you put this in perspective? How does a 2.5% city sales tax compare with other cities?
Well, in the region, it's pretty much the same. It would be the same. We're low by about 0.5%, and so the idea is really to focus on Tucson. So what does Tucson want for its quality of life, both in roads and in public safety, and that's the conversation.
If the measure passes, as you mentioned, the money will go to public safety and city roads. Why were those two areas singled out as opposed to just going into the general fund or any other sort of needs that Tucson has?
Back almost a year ago, I sat down with the council and went through a variety of needs and focusing on capital, and basically those are on our fixed assets. And roads is our largest fixed asset, needs to be improved. And so we have tremendous needs. There are over $700 million in needs when it comes to our road system. And public safety is right next in terms of some of the needs we have for our vehicles, both police and fire, our equipment, our apparatus. They're in a position where we are seeing catastrophic failures in some of those equipments.
If it passes, when will it come into effect?
So that would be a decision that could be made by the council in terms of when they set the ballot language. My suggestion to the council would be immediately, as soon as July 1 of 2017.
What happens if voters turn the measure down?
Well, we continue to do what we've been doing, which is piecing together as best we can the resources that we have to address some of those needs. And clearly, when you look at the age of our fleet, police cars, that have 120,000 miles on it, that doesn't sound like a lot. But when you look at it in the context of how they're used, it really takes a toll on those vehicles and their reliability. Same thing with our fire trucks, our ladder trucks. We recently had a couple of large pieces of equipment, a ladder truck and fire truck, go down. And so the obvious answer would be, well, let's just go fix them. So we went and looked at them, and in order to fix them, we're basically rebuilding the entirety of it, of the machinery. And so it's just more efficient for us to buy new ones. And so when you start looking at it, eventually you'll pay more in maintenance costs than you do in purchasing new ones.
The City Council is also considering asking voters to approve a bond package. That would be next year. Can you talk to me a little bit about that proposal? Where does that fit into this tax hike in terms of sort of spending priorities?
The council did have a conversation about that, but they really deferred that decision until later. They wanted to focus on the roads and public safety. So there's still an opportunity to have that dialogue, but no decision on that has been made either. So that's really more of a conversation into the future.
But it is on the table still.
It is potentially on the table.
Is there any concern about going to voters with another bond package after voters rejected the Pima County's bond proposals last year?
Well, I think the key for this conversation is really the quality of life of Tucson and making it so refined and defined that people understand what they're voting on exactly. Here are the projects, here's the kind of improvement that we're proposing for our community.
Assuming the city tax hike passes and even the bond package next year, would these two proposals sufficiently meet Tucson's infrastructure needs? In other words, are they enough?
When you look at what we have in terms of our shortfall of, in terms of the needs that we have and what we'd like to see, we could certainly always use more. But clearly, what I tried to do is outline for the council our need versus our want. And so I think there's an opportunity for us to have that conversation. Our needs are many, and so we have to address those needs first, and then we can have a conversation about additional dollars and additional programs, those kind of things.
All right. Thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
That's it for us. Andrea Kelly will be back next week. We leave you now with an excerpt from an Arizona Illustrated story about Lauren Bruner, one of the only living survivors of the attack on the USS Arizona. Thanks for watching.
Japanese bombers hit the Arizona 4 times with their bombs.
And one of the bombs hit the number 2 turret, which is under my feet and about 20 feet ahead of it.
That 1,700-pound bomb glanced off the turret and dove 3 decks below, into the forward powder magazine on the starboard side of the ship.
Which, unfortunately, was where my buddy, Billy Mann, that was his station.
To watch the full story, visit our website. This Sunday, there's a public ceremony to mark the 75th anniversary of the bombing of Pearl Harbor. It'll include a dedication of the new USS Arizona Mall Memorial. That's Sunday, December 4th at 3 p.m. on the U of A Mall.